everyone, and welcome to Comes Lab episode 2, From Headlines to Heartlines. I'm Lucilda Campos, and I'm excited that you've joined us today. We know that the world feels heavy right now, and there's a lot competing for attention and a lot at stake for our social justice movement, for our equity, and for change. That's exactly why we wanted to bring this episode specifically tied to storytelling, because we know that today, more than ever, it is crucial that we bring those stories to the front line. We're not just talking about headlines or viral posts. We're talking about the kind of stories that build emotional connection, that spark action, that remind people of our shared humanity. Whether you're working on advocacy, media, or digital strategy, the ability to tell these stories is not just a skill, it's a strategy. Today, we're going to break that down for you with our incredible team at Communication Shop, who brings expertise in strategy, in media relations, and in creative storytelling. You'll hear practical tips, real-world examples, and ways to center community voices with dignity and impact. And with that, I want to open up the space to introduce our amazing panelists. We're going to start with Daniela Ruiz.
Hi, everyone. Really happy to be part of this conversation. As Lucilda said, I'm Daniela Ruiz. I'm the coordinator here at Communication Shop. So basically, I work really close with the partners to drive in storytelling into strategy. And yeah, I'll be sharing some tips of how to identify those stories and actually make a real change in the movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. We're going to hand it off to Karen Ottoni.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here with everyone. Karen Ottoni, like Lucilda just mentioned, I'm the media relations manager here at Communication Shop. And in my role, my goal is just to move beyond traditional press releases to build lasting, authentic relationships with journalists, reporters, editors through storytelling. So very excited for this webinar.
Thank you, Karen. Excited to hear from you and your expertise. And finally, we have Luisa Munoz, part of our creative team.
Hi, everyone. Luisa here, Luisa speaking. I'm the producer, director of Communication Shop. And my role basically here is to translate all those complex ideas and topics and information into engaging and emotional audiovisual content that really can connect with the audiences.
Thank you, Luisa. Well, this is who you're going to be hearing from today. We want you to think of this space as your creative playground. It's a low pressure, high energy space with ideas, experiences, and visions. We want this to be a two-way lab, so feel free to send any comments, any questions in the comment section. We are going to try and get to them. If we don't, we will be having a follow-up where we can send those answers via email, etc. And with that, we're just going to dive right into it. We're going to start off with Daniela Ruiz, who is going to tell us how we go from identifying these stories to crafting them so that they aren't just content, but that they become part of that thread that is part of the long-term strategy. So Daniela, you collaborate closely with partners and organizations on strategy. How do you weave these storytelling into those collaborations so it doesn't feel like it's just content, but actually strengthens the strategy and the mission of the organizations? Do you have any practical tips for the teams? Or do you have any cornerstones in identifying these stories?
Thank you, Lucila. Yeah, I have some tips. So we're going to start talking about storytelling that actually serves the mission. And what do I mean with that? Well, first, let's go back. First, before finding the stories and how to share them, we need to ask ourselves, what's the goal? What are we trying to move? Because if we don't know where do we want to reach, then like it doesn't matter how big is the story, because we're not going to be making that for a purpose. So that's my first tip. Start with purpose, and then once we have a clear objective of where we want to be, then we can choose the best story to actually get there and be sure that we serve the mission. Second tip, let the story work for the work. The right story moves action, not just attention. And that's why I was telling it's really, really important to be to really be aware of where we want to be. What's the change we want to build in the movement? Because we can have a great story and it can make maybe some noise, but we really want that story to drive to the change. So that's my second tip. Then respect the storyteller's humanity. We need to keep in mind that every story is a person experience. They are sharing with us their fears, their stories, their resilience. So we will need always to remember that and make sure that the way we tell their stories is by respecting their humanity, and that means always having in mind dignity, respect, and care for each other. And finally, connect the stories to what's happening on the ground. In these difficult times, there's a lot going on. So we don't need to choose a story and then just share it and that's it. No, we need to link it to the bigger goal, to the whole spectrum of the movement. And we have a lot of things to start. So that's my last story tip. Choose a story, share it, but connect it with something bigger, and always having in mind your goal as an organization.
And I think that's a hard one, Daniela, because as you mentioned, like there's so much going on. We all have very strong and powerful stories. That doesn't mean that they're not necessarily important in the moment or that they don't fit well with the movement. It's just selecting the right story, right? And being able to link it to the bigger picture. So with that in mind, what are some common mistakes professionals can have made, or how do you try to integrate storytelling into their strategy? And how do you avoid those mistakes, right?
Yeah, that's a hard one, right? Because nowadays, with all the information we have out there and all the channels we have, it's hard to pick like the right story, and then not only picking that, but how to share it to the world. So I'm going to tell you what to avoid, and what works. Okay, so first, we need to avoid relying everything on data. Okay, we need to have those facts and clear information, because that's also really important for the movement, right? We can't only rely on personal stories, but we can't center all the focus there, right? Because people is tired of information. Like, we get information everywhere, so we're like, for actually connecting with people and make that change, actually make them move, we need to connect them emotionally, and that's centering the focus on the real stories. I mean, putting a human face in those stories. So that's the first thing. Second, using storytelling as a one-way process. What do I mean? For example, I choose a story for a worker who is having a problem accessing to healthcare, and then that's it. I ask him to give me the story. I I plan how to share it, I do the work, and start moving the story. No, that's not ethical. Practicing ethical storytelling means involving the people who is sharing the story with you. Show the draft, ask for feedback, always ask them if they are comfortable of how you are sharing their story. That's key for actually having a truly impactful story. Third, skipping consent or cutting out the storytellers. And this one is really linked with the one I just mentioned. And as I said at the beginning, we're talking about humans. We're real people who are facing a lot of things, and it's not easy in these times. I'm sorry for saying again, but in these times it's really hard to open and to be brave enough to share your story out loud. So if you have someone who is doing that, then take care of him or her or they. And how do you do that? Truly listen the person. Don't like, for example, if you have a part of this story that it's really cheesy, like that, it's going to be, for example, really good for media. Don't rush. First, ask, listen to the person, and see what they want to share and how, and then together you can build that story. But that's really, really, really important, because if we don't do that, then we're sharing the story for only marketing or branding, and we don't want that. We're working here for a real change and for the movement. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Daniela. I know that Communication Shop has done amazing storytelling and we have tons of examples, but I know you bring one specifically. So if you want to share, we'd love to hear from you on how you crafted this story, how far it went, and how it was able to support the organization's mission at the moment.
Yes, thank you, Lucila. Well, doing a short recap of everything I have been saying, we have a really good example of how to actually put a human face on an issue. And this is a campaign we worked a few months ago this year in Richmond. So the campaign goal was to push for better wage for contract city workers. And we didn't get the votes to do that, but it doesn't matter, because what we actually did is with storytelling, we helped shift the narrative and build long-term momentum for this issue to keep pushing and to keep fighting until it's real. So what we did is that we, with a partner that was SIU Virginia, we found stories. We found workers who are living those situations, who are facing the weight of not having that wage every day. So we did that, and we basically worked to share those stories on social media. Of course, on media, we had a media strategy. And lastly, on the ground, we also have some projects to share their stories during the public hearings. But I want to show you an example that we put on social media, that it's a short reel, so we can see what I mean as doing, making the issue human. So we'll see the video.
Hi, my name is Kyrie Fields, and I'm an armed security officer, city contracted worker for the city of Richmond. What I like most about my job is that I get to keep my people and my community protected. Most of all, overly excited to get to help out my community and give back. Recently, the city raised the minimum wage to $20 an hour for its workers, but as a city contracted worker, I was left out. It doesn't make sense. I work hard every day doing my part to keep the community safe, but I'm still not treated the same as any city employees. It's not fair. I live with my mother and I do my best to help her by covering bills like cable and rent when I can, but it's still a constant challenge. I don't receive any benefits, no paid sick days or vacation holidays, and it makes everything even harder. After today, I hope that our words and our encouragement can appease the minds of the city councilmen to help us and amend the budget to provide livable wages for city contractor workers. All I want is to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. I want to be able to get out of my mother's house, build financial stability, and finally start my adult life. The city must ensure that all workers in our city are treated with dignity and respect through fair pay. We deserve a chance to thrive, not just survive. Thank you.
So why this strategy worked? Because first we put a face to the issue. It's not the same like to talk, give facts about an issue, data, but without putting a face and showing the real impact that it's having this issue into regular lives. So that was the first key. Second, it was participatory because we didn't stole the stories from the workers. We asked them to share them with us, and we collaborate with them to build these final videos and other tactics that we see. And finally, we create pressure and visibility because I want to say that this issue wasn't really popular among other issues that we see during the legislative session. So how to make an issue that it's often ignored or put in a second place to spotlight. But that's how you do it. You show real people and tell their stories. So yeah, that's how we did it, and I'm sure this strategy it's not over because now we're starting to shift the narrative, and we'll keep pushing and fighting until this issue is worked or finds a solution.
Thank you, Daniela. I love the video. I love how powerful Kyrie comes up in the video, like just being real and being able to connect. I think we can all relate to the fact that we work hard, and what we do with our money is support our families, and how seriously we take our jobs, especially when it comes to protecting the community like his role is. So thank you for sharing that very powerful example. I think my biggest takeaway from the conversation with you is definitely keeping in mind that these stories are human stories, right? And that the people listening to them are also human. So what is that connection that we can find so that others can shift or change their posture on certain issues? I think it's also making sure that we're taking care of the people that are willing and able to come up and be powerful alongside us by sharing their stories. And finally, making sure that, that the end goal is always in mind. And a lot of the times when we think of campaigns, we think that the end goal is winning that one campaign. And even when we don't get that legislation passed or when we don't get that campaign through, it doesn't mean that it didn't work. It just means that we are slowly working towards that goal, right? And so being able to keep in mind that our goal as storytellers is not necessarily just to pass the legislation, but to shift the culture around the issue, to shift the narrative so that we can pass that one legislation and many more that are related to that one issue. So thank you so much for sharing with us, Daniela. I think that takes us on to, taking it a step further. How do we get these stories? How do we identify them, craft them? And then how do we make sure that everybody can hear them, not just the people in our localities, but that we can utilize media and other influencers to uplift these very important stories? So with that, we're going to talk to Karen Ottoni, who is our media relations manager at Communication Shop. And we're going to start off very basic, Karen. Like, why is it so critical in the media that we're in the media sharing these stories in today's environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's also so hard, right? Nowadays, we know that the news cycle is more crowded than ever. A human-centered story is really going to be able to cut through the noise. And we also have so many channels and different new ways of getting to an audience. We used to have only TV stations, newspapers, radio shows, and a couple, like we're talking 10 years ago or so. Nowadays, you have influencers that have accounts everywhere: TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. You have former journalists that are opening and creating their new channels to communicate with their audiences. You have digital pages, you have podcasts. I mean, we can talk about here all day about non-traditional media, but the way to really get to them is with those human stories and good stories, because they're more likely to be shared and more likely to be amplified organically. And we always want something that we can relate to. If I see someone that also loves dogs and cats, I'm gonna like that and I'm gonna share it in my profile because I also love animals. So you have to find something that the community and the audience can really relate to. Facts, data, figures are really important, but that emotion and personal narrative that a human story can bring, that's just going to be something that people are going to remember, people are going to connect to, and it's just going to help us get our message out there. So stories that are built with trust and empathy, they help us make those relationships not only with media, but also with the audience. We have to also keep in mind that when we bring those human stories to media, we're also helping them because they need content and they need good quality content that they can provide to their audience. So we become a resource for them. We work both ways. He helps us amplify our messaging, our campaigns, our initiatives, but we're also making sure to help them with their coverage that, is nonstop. We also have to realize that media is just, media members are just like us. They're humans. They care about issues that we sometimes work on. I'm talking about immigration, environmental justice, LGBT community, and we just have to connect with them to be able to help them bring those stories to life.
Definitely. I love how you mentioned the two-way relationship, right? Like it's not just us sharing our stories, but it's also them wanting to uplift and cover these stories. So with that being said, I mean, I know we talked about there being so much going on in the media right now. There's just a lot that's getting attention or a lot of distractions out there. So how do you support organizations to get their stories told, to get their stories covered? How do we go from sending a press release or a press advisory into really getting that coverage that goes beyond a media statement or a media post?
Yeah. We always try to be ahead and to be, like I was saying, that resource or that best friend to any reporter, any editor, right? So to be able to really shift from the traditional media advisory, press release, we have to build that relationship first with the reporter. So we can always just make sure to send them a text, and then a quick email with the information that they need to cover something, or to be able to send them ready to use content. What we have done for multiple campaigns event is distribute media packages. Sometimes they can have a press release with really important information, quotes, links to data, links to reports, links to information that is valuable and that the reporters need to cover the stories. But also we provide them B-roll, so it's video ready for them just to cut and create their story, either for social media pages, for TV, or for digital websites. We also provide them sound bites, so we do the interview with their spokespeople, we cut those sound bites, and they're ready for any reporter or editor to just download and use them for their stories. So we also try to anticipate challenges to coverage, right? We try to see what's going on in the news cycle, what can we anticipate that's going to happen next week, next month, events, holidays, things like that. They can sometimes just take all of the coverage on the traditional media. And we always also try to plan for after a campaign, after an event, how can we amplify whatever we're trying to promote, whatever message we try to get there. Sometimes, for example, we draft bilingual blog. can be a blog in Spanish, English, that we can send that is ready to use for newspapers, for digital websites, for newsletters, and they're able to include it. And we provide that content that is ready to go, that has been copy edited, that has good pictures, good quality links, and media really appreciate that because they know that we're doing kind of like the job for them, their work, but of course always making sure that it's done correctly. So yeah, that's how we do it.
I love all the thought that goes into making sure that, those covering the stories have everything that they need in order to be able to successfully share and uplift the stories and the amazing work that's happening on the ground. I think on my end, sometimes I also think of what does it look like to prepare the people who are actually going to be speaking to reporters? What does that mean to make sure that they're comfortable, that they feel like they can be open, and that they feel like if they, end up sharing something that they don't necessarily want published, that they have that confidence to say, hey, can we make sure that doesn't get covered? Do you have any special tips or tricks that you do when preparing people to be spokespeople or to do interviews with media?
Yeah, so I think that we always try to prepare spokespeople or members of the community on narrative arcs and not just talking points. We don't just provide them, for example, a page of information and we tell them memorize it. No, because we always want them to feel confident, prepared, and that they're not memorizing just sentences to tell a reporter or a media member. We always encourage those authentic stories. We just tell them, okay, how do you want to tell your story? How do you want the community to know about what has happened to you, or how this initiative or this campaign can change your life? We always encourage them just to speak from their heart, but of course we prepare them to feel comfortable with that. Besides doing like mock interviews, practice questions, we provide them information from reporters ahead of time so they know who they're going to be talking to. We tell them the media that they work on, if we have any information about their style of coverage, with their main topics, anything that can help them just feel related or feel comfortable with whoever the interviewer is. We prepare them with that. We also provide like speaker packages, and we always tell them that if they want to protect, for example, their identity, there's ways to do that with technology nowadays. There's way to edit like the video, the audio. So we make sure that we find ways to make them feel comfortable. And we always work with the reporters, right, to make sure that they respect any request that the spokespeople or directly impacted community members can have. We also make sure that we practice reading from questions that they might not want to answer, so they have the necessary tools to be able to bring back that conversation to their messaging and to what they're ready to talk about.
I love that. I think as we're talking about the storytelling and sharing and uplifting the work that's happening on the ground, the one thread that continues to come through is the relationship building, right? Like we want to build those intentional relationships with the community who's sharing their stories. We want to build that relationship with those reporters or people who are covering the stories. But then how do we bridge that so that there is a strong relationship amongst the organizations doing the work on the ground, the reporters, and maybe even the media outlets or channels, whether that be, a news station, a radio station, a podcast, or maybe even an influencer? How do you support organizations in building those relationships long term?
Yeah, I always try to tell them to think about any interaction with a media member as a way to build a new friendship. I always tell them after you finish an interview, offer to be a resource, offer to provide contacts of partners, connect them with other organizations, make sure that they know that you have a value, right? That they can come to you for any other article, any other interviews that they might need in the future, and that you will be able to help them. Also recognize their deadlines, their time frames. We always try to reply as soon as a reporter sends us a request to make sure that they know that we, are mindful of their time, of their deadlines, and we provide them with any type of resources that we have. It can be data, reports that they can include in their stories. I think that after any stories also published. We encourage organizations to just uplift that content, and it's not just providing like one post on social media with the link, right? We sometimes cut clips from an interview, so we keep promoting that content from weeks ahead of the time. And yeah, I will just say you have to like the goal has to be a reliable resource for them, so they can value you as a resource for them. Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I think, as we continue to think of our movement and how we're strengthening, especially in these times when everyone and everything that we've fought so hard for is under attack, we will keep very in mind that, working with media is not just about uplifting a story or posting a story or going viral, but it's about making sure that we're growing our movement even within those channels of communication, so that today and in the future, we have those strong relationships. Being prepared, knowing how to create these packets, knowing how to prepare the people who are sharing their stories, so that just like you and Daniela mentioned, right, that we can share these stories from a place of dignity and respect, and that we can ensure that we are bringing the people who are sharing those stories along the entire process and not just in the beginning or in the end, right? That they form a part of all those edits, all those conversations, drafting questions, etc. And so thank you for that. We're going to move on to Luisa and talk about how do you capture those stories that maybe were already crafted, that have already been in the media, and how do you use a creative mindset to put them in a format that can live far beyond, the 1 week news cycle. And so for that, we're going to talk to Luisa. And Luisa, many organizations work on incredible projects. They're doing amazing work on the ground, but sometimes they struggle to identify the stories behind the numbers. We know that everybody does, metrics or does reports, or they're even working on advocacy and mobilizing people. What are some practical ways communications teams can dig deeper to uncover those human stories that deserve being told? And how do you translate that hard work into, videos or graphics that can live far beyond the action?
Thank you, Lucilda. So, yeah, there are a lot of work there behind that. I think that finding the story behind the numbers and data, I would like to say that it's going beyond the statistics in numbers and metrics, and show the real stories behind those numbers, right? So let's start with this. Storytelling, it's not a trend, right? Right now we usually see blogs, videos telling about what is storytelling, but showing that storytelling is something new, but it's not, right? Storytelling is not a trend. Actually, is the oldest way we have to basically make sense to the world we live in, share knowledge, and move people, right? Think about since way back when people share stories around maybe a campfire, or with your friends, or with your family, right? All the way to today's podcasts, Instagram reels, YouTube reels, movie videos, radio, right? Those formats that we have right now. But storytelling has always been there, making sense of things, right? But it helps us right now to take those numbers, or maybe complex topics or information, and turn them into something that people can actually relate and feel part of. That's like the difference between when we share metrics just as we have them, instead of showing the faces and the numbers behind those metrics, right? Let's take a look at this example that we have right now. Imagine that your organization have like a report, right? And the report says that housing costs increased by 25% this year, right? This is like the raw information that we have. We can share it as it is, right? We have two options. We can share it in an informative approach or with a storytelling approach. We have those options. We can share it as we can share it, for example, housing costs in the city increased by 25% over the past year, making it harder for low-income families to afford rent. We actually share the information. But what is the difference between showing in that way instead of showing it with a story, telling that story? And we have the other approach. Last month, Maria, a single mother of two, got a notice her rent is going up again. For Maria, this is just a number. It's a question of choosing between rent and groceries, right? And she's not alone. A new report shows housing costs have risen by 25% this year, pushing thousands of families to the edge. So you can see how you connect with the same exact information by using two different ways to share that information, right? Now, we understand what the storytelling is, right? But Luisa, where do we start? How can we start, right? First, in my experience, instead of starting with what do we do or what do we do, it's better to start by asking who is impacted and who we want to move, right? Why it's so important to first identify who we'll be speaking to, because that way we will know, we will communicate through which channels and what, even in the language. We will identify the language, the tone, and the format that maybe we will going to be using. Numbers are important, right? But the real people behind them make other cares about those numbers. Yeah. Second, talk to your staff, your volunteers, your community members, because they often see those powerful stories that maybe teams in offices might miss, right? Third, spend time listening. You can implement interviews, focus groups, events, identify those insights that will help you discovering what you need to communicate and how. Even though we are talking about being storytellers, I think nowadays it's imperative not just to be a storytellers, but story understanders. And what does it mean? It means that before we are going to tell a story, right, we need to first connect with that story, listen, and to understand it from a position from empathy, right, and true connection, not in a transactional approach or way, because I think that those stories need the respect, right? So I think it's very important to approach in that way. First, you are going to be a storyteller because you are showing and telling that story, but take the time to truly understand and connect with that story. And fourth, identify the right insight. Data and focus groups can provide valuable insights, right? Yeah. That will help us build the narrative, formats, and messages. And finally, always remember that if stories are sensitive, Daniela was talking about this, when we have sensitive stories, how can we protect those people identities? Because many times we can forget that behind of those stories are people, because of the desire and the urgency to share it, right? So to talk a little bit about more, how can we protect those identities, especially when it's sensitive content, or we have to safeguard that identity and the person behind that story because of protection. There are examples on how can we do it. when it comes from vulnerable people, and if is that the case, there are many ways to do it. We are going to see just 3 examples. The first one is we can blur faces, right? When it's content, video, or images, to keep individuals' identities confidential, right? We also can avoid like locations if they are easy to identify, maybe backgrounds, or maybe not showing those sensitive locations or landmarks, addresses that maybe can compromise safety. And use symbolic representation. This is like my favorite one, because it's like the one that implements a lot of creativity. There are a lot of ways in creativity, like resources, formats that we can use to tell stories, and without showing the faces of people, right? This is an example we implement, and we told an impactful story. It's a real story by using graphic and animation resources. So we are going to see this video very quickly.
This Women's History Month, we honor women who fight for their families against impossible odds. Get to know Patricia's story. Marua, Cameroon. The heat is relentless. Water is scarce. The disease is spreading. Her children are suffering fevers, infections, and boils. No answers. No relief. She makes a painful decision. They must leave home. Just when they find relief in a cooler region, civil war breaks out. As educators became targets, they were kidnapped at gunpoint. There is no other option. They seek asylum in the US. Today, Patricia's children are safe, but millions of families continue to flee from climate disasters. We don't migrate because we want to. We are forced to do so. Climate change is a women's issue, a family issue, a human issue.
So just to close the idea, the stories out there can be shared in many different ways. It's a matter of, 1, understanding the importance of that story, 2, being very attentive to identify those stories that will help us to connect our communication goals in our organizations, as well, and connect and mobilize audiences.
Thank you, Luisa. Such a powerful example of how we can share stories without exposing people or showing people fully, because we know that that's a huge concern in today's world. I think my next question is, how, once you find those stories, what tips would you give to turn these complex topics into these audiovisual contents that still feel human, relatable, and emotionally engaged?
Right. First, as you said, making human and relatable. I mean, when we talk about content, and not only creating but sharing that content, my tip, the biggest tip I always share is less is more, right? Because I mean, instead of trying to explain everything when we have a lot of information, right? We usually try to put all the information in just one single product. It can be a video, it can be a reel, it can be a blog, you name it. But instead of doing that and putting all that information, we can break it into parts. We can break it into sections. Because in that way, it will be easier to digest that information. We usually want to put all the information in a single product because we want to share as much information as possible. But when we do that, we are actually overwhelming people, right? Why? If we have a complex or difficult a topic, it's good to use that into your advantage. And what do I mean with that? It means that you can create a whole series of content that allows you to share that long and complex information, but into a stage, right? We need to remember, for example, now on social media, that people's attentions are getting shorter, right? Right now, it's from about 3 to 5 seconds to capture the attention. And when we have them And if we give them a lot of too much information, we are going to be actually overwhelming them. Because as consumers on social media, we don't, or even on printed materials, it doesn't have to be only on social media, printed materials. We don't read the content at first. What we usually do is that we scan the content before reading or consuming it. So if we can easily scan it, it won't be, if we can't easily scan it, it won't even be easy to read it. So second, use real emotion in situations people can recognize. It can be joy, it can be worry, hope, because we connect more with feelings. Choose the right tone. Always think, for example, and this is a difficult one for us as a creators or as a communicators. If you're scrolling, if you were the user or target audience, would you stop to watch that, right? If you are not going to, if you weren't the producer but the viewer, that's a difficult question to ask ourselves because it affects our ego, right? We may say, how I'm not going to watch this content because I dedicated so much time. But the problem is that we often see it from the perspective of the producer, as an organization, but not as the people who will consume that content. And answer that question, we don't ask that question ourselves because we are afraid to say that we wouldn't consume it if we were the viewers, right? And finally, it's not about translating, it's transcreating. Remember that there's a difference between that, especially when we have content that are in different languages. We have many examples, for example, in Spanish, that one word can mean many different things in different regions or countries, or even though the target audience, right? We are not going to be talking about the same way we talk to Gen Z audiences, to maybe a boomer, for example. They consume content different and on different channels. So I have here some examples, but because of time, we are going to skip it. You can see this information on the presentation because we are going to share this information to you, the presentation, so you can read it and dive in a little bit more. But this is a practical example of transcreating. Yeah, this was a campaign that we have the honor of working with League of Women Voters and Vote 411 to encourage Spanish-speaking audiences to register and inform themselves in the elections that we had in 2024. So even though the message was the same, the audience was Spanish-speaking audiences, we approach the PSA different because we have different audiences in 5 different states, and we also use B-roll in different ways to match their culture that we were talking to. But yeah, you can see this on our social media channel, so go there.
Thank you, Luisa. Thank you for those powerful examples, and we promise we're going to share those materials with you. I think, as we close out our webinar for today, we want to absolutely thank Karen, Daniela, and Luisa for sharing their expertise. We want to remind everyone that as we go through these challenging times in all of our movements, we keep in mind that it is our stories and it is through storytelling that we're able to connect with others, that we're able to uplift our humanity. And it is through our stories that we have been able to see these amazing changes that we've been able to create in the past, right? And so today, more than ever, it is critical and it is important that we stay sharing our stories and that we find new and creative ways of uplifting the realities that we're living, the vision that we have for our movements, And so with that, we're closing today's webinar. Remember that the webinar doesn't stop. The lab doesn't stop when the webinar ends. We will be sending you more information. We invite you to connect with us. Our social media channels and our website are going to be on our screen now. And then if you're looking for support in bringing your communications to life, whether it's through storytelling, media strategy, or timeless creative content like videos and examples like the ones we shared today, we'd love to partner up with you and be a part of your extended team. So feel free to reach out to Communications Shop. And thank you for joining us today. We'll see you in our next Comms Lab.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.